My name is Clark Power. I teach here at Notre Dame. I teach in a program of liberal studies. I am, in terms of this building, I'm on the faculty board on athletics, so I have a kind of oversight role vis-a-vis the athletic department. I did see our athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, yesterday afternoon, and he assured me he will be here. These banners that you see were brought up from just outside the Purcell Pavilion where we had a basketball game last night. So as you would come in to watch the game, you'd read Pope Francis's statement. So Jack has been actually a strong proponent, circulated in the athletic department, the Pope's letter that was part of your packet that accompanied the dicastery document that we're going to be working on this morning. So he'll come when he comes. He'll have a few words to say with us. I will give you a quick overview and invite others to join us. Here's our athletic director. I'll be really quick. So what basically, as you can see, the format's going to be, we're going to have some plenary talk at the podium, and Jack's going to kick it off. We're going to quickly get into tables, so we have organized you according to team names. So we're going to go back and forth. The whole idea of a symposium is really to have conversation. And in our case, this is not just academic conversation that might lead to a journal article or something like that. This is certainly an academic, intellectual conversation, but it's one that leads to practice. And so the experts in this room are really seated at the table. You're the experts. It's our job to listen carefully to you. So without ado, I'd like to introduce our athletic director, who's no stranger to many of you. He's spoken at Play Like a Champion conference. He spoke at the last one. A wonderful leader here at Notre Dame, but also nationally, Jack Swarbrick.
Thanks, Clark.
Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. Thrilled to have you here today, and especially thrilled to have this important subject and topic be part of your dialogue and be hosted here at the University of Notre Dame. These banners that you see on either side of me have been deployed at our venues throughout this year. We thought when we read the Pope's letter that it was a great thing to organize our year around. So we started with our coaches during the summer and introduced the themes introduced by Pope Francis, and have tried to communicate them to our audiences by having them in our venues. I won't read them to you. You can read them for yourself. But there are two elements of it that we have chosen to focus on that I think are very powerful statements about sport that are included in Pope Francis's letter. The first is that sport doesn't afford the opportunity to engage, at least successfully, in any form of prejudice. Sport's a great leveler. And if you make decisions based on anything other than the desired outcome, in some cases it's to build community, it might be to win, you'll lose. You won't get the results you want unless you let the dynamic of sport play out in the way it's intended. You cannot engage in prejudice and be successful in sport. It creates an artificial limit on the outcome of the event or the activity. The second part of the message, which I think is especially timely in today's environment, is that sport does not countenance selfishness. You can only reach your goals on a collective basis in sport. That's true even in individual sports. It's obvious in team sports. But the margins between success and failure are so small in modern athletics that unless you take advantage of all the resources and engage with everyone who can help you, you won't get there. You won't be successful. And sport is pure in that regard. If you want to go it alone, you won't succeed. And in an environment where a focus on self is increasingly the approach, Pope Francis says very eloquently in his letter that sport lays bare the fact that that approach cannot be successful in life. It offers a paradigm for the fact that if we attempt to pursue faith solely on an individual basis without help, or to build community solely on an individual basis without help, we won't succeed. In advancing those two critical notions related to sport, Pope Francis makes another important observation, both overtly and implicitly, and that relates to the power of sport. There's a reason that the Vatican chose to focus on the topic of sport at this time, both because of the need for sport to play a positive role, but the other is a recognition of that power, of the influence that sport has today in modern society. If I say LeBron, everybody knows who it is. If I say Ronaldo, everybody knows who it is. What other individuals from two sides of the globe carry that sort of recognition and influence? Not many. They are small examples of the power of sport. The most watched event in the world, the single event around which there is the greatest community in terms of people sharing the experience at the same time, is a sporting event, the World Cup. The second is a sporting event, the Olympics. Sport has extraordinary power. And part of the Pope's message is we ought to harness that power. You can decry it. You can say culturally, that's a bad thing. The emphasis on sport is excessive, it's out of balance, and I wouldn't disagree with you, but it is. And you can either curse the darkness or light a candle, the Pope says. Let's use sport. Let's use sport to help build a better society, to help build better relationships, and help to develop faith. The flip side of the power of sport, the power of it to build community and faith and a better society, is its power to hurt, its power to harm. It's true of anything that has that sort of magnitude. We have seen that play out dramatically in this country in youth sport in recent years. Most dramatically in cases of abuse of young people who have entrusted coaches in sports and have been horribly damaged by that trust. On the level at which I work, collegiate sports, we see it in the separation of the athletic activity from the educational mission of the university. Increasingly, in college athletics, it is operated as an entertainment enterprise rather than an educational enterprise. That's the danger inherent in the power of sport, that it can hurt young people, that it can undermine the core mission of a university. Situations that have played out so dramatically at some of our colleges and universities around the country in recent years. It's up to all of us engaged in sport to try and make sure that we find ways to mine the power for good and to guard against the power to undermine and hurt. I'm confident that we can do it, and it's forums like this, it's discussions like this that help us to think about it, that create the dialogue that makes that possible. Here at Notre Dame, we organize our activity, Notre Dame Athletics, around 5 core values. You will see them everywhere you go in our buildings. I hope our student athletes can articulate them. I know our coaches can. And they are as follows. The first is education. The message we are sending when we embrace education as a core value is twofold. The first is that sport, athletics conducted inside a university affords many young people a great opportunity to get a diverse and rich education from a great institution like Notre Dame. There is only one program in the history of this country that has provided a college education to more people than the grant and aid program administered by the National Collegiate Athletic Association. That's the GI Bill. After the GI Bill, athletics has paid for the education of more young people than any other program in the history of the United States. Education works on a second plane for us, though, also. Because of where we are and what we do, we expect our athletic programs themselves to be educational. That is a message we try and reinforce all the time to our coaches and sport administrators. The sport experience must educate, because our student athletes will spend more time in the classroom of the court or the field or the pool or the ice than any other classroom they'll be in. And they'll spend more time with that professor than any other professor they will be with at Notre Dame, so it better be educational. Secondly is tradition. It is important to embrace tradition, especially at a place like Notre Dame. At Notre Dame, if you do anything twice, it's a tradition. And somebody makes a t-shirt that relates to it. And that's great. We want to celebrate those traditions, just as we celebrate the traditions of our faith. But our message to our athletes is don't ever be bound by tradition. Tradition doesn't stop when the alums graduated. You have an obligation to create your own traditions, to build your own culture. And I think that's important for all of us to embrace. The next is competitive excellence. We compete to win. We never apologize for that. At Notre Dame, we're trying to win national championships. Last year, we won 2 and finished runner-up in another one. By that measure, it was an extraordinary year for us. You have to pursue that excellence in the right way. You have to reflect the right values, but never apologize for winning or for making winning a primary goal. Notre Dame is about excellence. It's about excellence in its residence halls, in its laboratories, in its classrooms. We're not going to be about anything less in athletics. Next is community. Sport builds community uniquely in modern society. And for us, building community exists on 3 planes. We want to engage with the community in which we work and play, the greater South Bend region. Next, we want to engage in the community of campus. We are different in that regard than most athletic departments in the United States, most universities in the United States. Our student athletes reside in residence halls for 3 years, just like any other student soon will be required to under the emerging rules at the university. We expect them to engage fully. There aren't separate courses. There's not a separate path to an education. There isn't a separate residence system. They are part of the university community. And we try and schedule our days so they can take advantage of that opportunity. And finally, it's the community of team. You have an obligation to build community within your team. We don't have any programs here that are successful that don't reflect a strong community dynamic within the team. It sounds trite, but no team has ever succeeded in any venue, but especially here, without players that love each other. That's the core dynamic of a strong community. And our final value that you see reflected throughout the building is faith, is a topic you are engaged in here today. And like the others, it works on a couple of planes. The first is we embrace the Catholic tradition and ethos of Notre Dame. We do not shy away from it. I meet with a lot of prospective student athletes when they're considering where they might go to school. And the first thing I say to them is this is a faith-based institution. It is not about being one faith. It may come as a surprise to you, but we can't compete for a national championship in football if we only recruit Catholic football players. But it is about believing that faith is important. This is the wrong place to be as a student athlete if you don't value faith. And finally, we tell them that faith also reflects a core element of your experience here if you're going to be successful at Notre Dame. The ultimate manifestation of faith, the ultimate manifestation of a belief in a divine being is a recognition that we are all children of God. And it is a recognition that your teammates, and yes, your opponents, are children of God. And that you engage with them, that you compete alongside or against them with that recognition. And given that dynamic, that you represent the university appropriately in recognition that sportsmanship isn't just something to be considered occasionally. It is central to a strong, vibrant athletic experience, especially at a faith-based institution. I thank you all for being here today. I applaud your commitment to this important topic, and go Irish.
Thanks, Jack. You appreciate that. So Jack is headed off to the ACC, the women's tournament, which starts up tomorrow, I think. So now it's my honor and pleasure to introduce a friend and a scholar whose work many of you already know. What? Yes. Oh yeah, I'm introducing you, but I'm forgetting about the bishop. Oh yeah, actually, Bishop Hying is going to come up first. Right, you're going to come up. I need to introduce Pat later, but let me introduce Bishop Hying, and just with a word of gratitude and acknowledgement. This whole idea, I told Bishop Hying, was his idea. That last June, he gave a talk on the dicastery document at the Play Like a Champion June conference, and then we were talking, and I said how much I appreciated the talk and whatever. And out of that, we got thinking about next steps. I mean, where do we go from here? And so this event flowed naturally out of that. Let's bring people together. Let's revisit this document, and let's explore with the folks who've been doing the work for so long with our children in different communities. Let's talk, and we'll keep the dicastery document in mind, and we'll see where we go from there. So Bishop Hying, so sorry, I got overload, old guy. I didn't get it all, but thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Clark. Clark, when you said scholar, I knew you weren't talking about me, so. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for being here. I drove in from Gary, where I'm the bishop, and Richard, Kristen's father, is a member of our diocese, as Kristen was originally. And I got pulled into this about a year and a half ago. I wrote a column in our weekly Catholic paper on what religion and sports have to say to each other. And a lot of it is what Jack wonderfully articulated just now. But I was always struck by the fact that both religion and sports have public liturgy. So when you think about it, we have Mass on Sunday, but go to a football game, and that's as liturgical as you're going to get, right? Because massive numbers of people gathering to participate in this repetitive ritual and to draw meaning and joy and to find community there. And in my column, I lamented the fact that people seem much more enthused about sports than religion. And if people were half as excited about going to Mass as they were to a Packers game, I'm from Wisconsin, the church would be in a far better place. But as Jack articulated, the Pope has laid out for us, and this is what I was trying to say in my column as well, that there's no point in fighting the power of sports, but rather how can we seek an integration between sports and faith, between what the church is trying to do and what sports is all about. So I was thunderstruck when this document came out last year from the Vatican, and after reading it, I thought it was one of the best things that's come out of Rome in many years in terms of just its practical application, and it's speaking to something as important as sports. St. John Paul II was probably the first, at least modern pope, who was a great athlete. I mean, he played soccer, he downhill skied till he was like 75, and his doctor told him he couldn't anymore. He swam, he was a mountaineer. He did all those things. And so in many of his reflections throughout his pontificate, he talks about the integration of sports and religion as well. But I think this document is really the first time that that's articulated in a formal magisterial way. As I came to know the work of Play Like a Champion, I applaud the intuition, the insight that really fuels the work of Play Like a Champion. And it's that in our current cultural moment, coaches, CYO directors, teachers have more entree to our young people than probably priests and bishops and all the official people of the church, right? So in many ways, a coach for those student athletes is their priest. If you think of a priest as a pontifex, so we get the word pontiff from Latin pontifex, which means bridge. The coach is the bridge for those students to lead them to understand God, to know themselves, to discover their gifts, to grow in virtue, to understand what it means to be a human person fully alive. And so the insight of Play Like a Champion is if we can form all the folks that work in the church with athletics, we're going to have greater traction with forming our young people to the heart of Christ. And that's really what it's all about. So I just applaud what all of you do. Some of you work in dioceses that literally have hundreds of sports teams. I mean, anybody in professional sports would be jealous, right, of what some of you do. And it's an enormous responsibility. When I came to Gary as bishop 4 years ago, I was heartened to know that we still have an active CYO. But it's hard, isn't it? I mean, there's just so much competition. There's all the other ways for children to do sports today. And sometimes it seems like our share of that pie or participation is getting squeezed by all those other opportunities. But I would dare say that the Catholic Church is still one of the largest sponsors of sport globally and certainly in our country. And your presence here today speaks of the importance of that. So really, a lot of what we're about today, I think, is seeking that integration. How do we integrate sports into the wider vision of what the church is? But I just hope you leave today knowing that the church greatly appreciates your vocation, values what you do, and realizes the significance of your entree, your reach into the lives of our young people. So the more you approach what you do vis-a-vis our young people with that intentionality of Christian formation, that Catholic vision, the more effective we will be in informing our young people to be disciples of the Lord. If you look at the human person philosophically, we're a composite. We're body, soul, mind, and heart. And the church has always had something to say about all those pieces because we can never just take one piece of the human person. We're not just this disembodied intellect. We're not this pure spirit. We're not just a body without a spirit. We're all of that together. And Jesus Christ says in John's Gospel, I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. So when one pursues the task of Christian excellence, that involves the body, the soul, the mind, and the heart. And so it's no accident that as far back as St. Paul's writings, in his letters to the various Christian communities at Corinth particularly, he uses athletic language to articulate what Christian discipleship looks like. So when you think of, much of that is listed up here in your banners, but when you think of what do our athletes learn from sports, cooperation, giving our best, humility, generosity, learning limitations, learning how to lose, sacrifice, excellence, virtue. All of those things, I think you can easily see are also applied to the Christian life. So if we can help our students to see what they're doing athletically is what they're doing morally, is what they're doing religiously, is what they're doing intellectually, that all of that put in motion together brings us into that abundance of life that Christ wants to give us. Jack talked about some of the potential damaging effects of sports, and we can think of unhealthy competition, winning at all costs, and we see that with parents sometimes, right? Every parent thinks their 5-year-old is going to be a college athlete, and they're going to pay all their way through university. Exclusivity at times, that only those that are really good get to play, or other kids just sit on the bench. Just the whole sense of disintegrating sports from any sort of ethic of cooperation or mutuality or complementarity. So I think the church's voice is a prophetic one in this context, because we stand for a broader vision which helps make sense of sports in that wider context of Christian excellence and of just being a human being fully alive. The only sport I played in school was basketball, but my greatest memory of anything to do with sports goes back to 4th grade gym class. I know this is going to sound crazy. So I wasn't that good. I was never picked first. I was never the star of the team. But one time we were playing basketball in 4th grade gym class, and the gym teacher asked me to be one of the heads of one of the teams, and we were picking teams. And God put this on my heart. I don't know, maybe I was already thinking I was going to be a priest, feeling sorry for the underdog. But I picked the kid first that never got picked for anything. I'll never forget the look of surprise on his face. It's like, why are you picking me? There's a look of surprise on the other kid's face who's picking the other team. It's like, how can you be that stupid, right? What are you picking him for? So he picked the best kid. So it was my turn. I picked the second worst kid. So we had the worst team. We had the absolutely worst team, and it was for an entire week of gym class that we were in those configurations of those teams. We didn't win. We hardly ever scored. But at the end of that, what made me happy as this 4th grader is that I saw kids that never got picked for anything or never felt important, that at least in somebody's eyes, they were picked first for something. So our vision of sports is that everyone can participate, that this is a team effort, that it's not winning at all costs, that in essence, we get there together, right? It's kind of what heaven is, right? St. John Vianney, who is the patron saint of parish priests, said that for a parish priest, he will be judged at the end of his life by how many people he brings with him to the pearly gates or the kingdom of God. And I think that can be said of sports as well, that when we bring all of our youth together in that vision of the abundant life that Christ wants for us, we succeed together. And certainly winning is great, but at the end of the day, we all know that it's ultimately about something far greater than that. So it's wonderful to be here. I really know nothing. I just think it's funny that somehow I've become the bishop involved in this, but I am all for it. I am all for it because I see the power of sport, and rather than curse the darkness, as Jack said, or criticize it, how can we, in essence, enter into it and integrate it and utilize its power for the ultimate power, which is, the kingdom of heaven and salvation. So thank you. It's wonderful to be here.